Hello and welcome to the Horror of It All movie podcast. I'm Eric. I'm solo again. This time I'm going to be talking about my favorite 25 Vinegar Syndrome releases. I had this planned for a while and I've been randomly adding to it and things like that. But I figured what better time to do it now than there is the halfway to Black Friday sale coming up. And I know there'll be a lot of choices from what I talk about, but anybody that's listening from the Vinegar Syndrome group that I posted this in, these are just favorites. I don't have a top 25 or anything order. These are just favorites out of my ever-growing Vinegar Syndrome collection. I've definitely got to the point where it has its own shelf. I have pretty much most of their releases. And I've been a fan and been buying their stuff since pretty much the beginning. I mean, my first thing I bought from them was the Herschel Gordon Lewis collection, which is their first thing they put out. So it's been a long time. I initially found them because of conventions, and from there I discovered them. Not discovered them, but I decided to start going direct as well, which is the best way to do it. Anybody that doesn't know that or is new to them or anything, it's always best to go direct because the money goes directly to them, and that means more releases. Because they just do an amazing job at all of their releases, even if it's movies that other than them in a million years somebody would never have released it, and they give it such the care that some people say that it almost like didn't deserve or care that it deserved or whatever. But I get what they're saying. A couple of things I want to talk about. I know the people from the group probably already know this, but there's still new people, and if you're curious, Vinegar Syndrome is a term used to describe the chemical reaction that goes on during the deterioration of celluloid. Basically the presence of an odor, and it does not mean the film has been degraded, but rather than it's a reaction. It's the name for the acidic smell of the deteriorating film. I've known that for a while. I just always thought it was cool that that's why they called it that. And also, anybody that's just listening to the Horror of It All movie podcast and isn't too familiar with Vinegar Syndrome, Vinegar Syndrome is an American, I guess, home video distribution. It's not really home video to me. I think like VHS when I was a kid, but that's kind of how I feel about them anyway, because their stuff, when they release it, and their surprise releases and things like that, it just reminds me of going to the video store as a kid and discovering all these movies, because I love Arrow, I love Scream Factory, and a lot of the other ones, 88 Films, Blue Underground, and so on. But and Severin, of course, Severin. And there's so many of them. But Vinegar Syndrome's a different one. They're definitely one that take movies that most people don't deal with. They're so obscure, or like just movies that have been lost, kind of, and they're pretty much saving them. Basically what I'm saying is they're definitely a company that I discover their movies more from when I buy them from them. Like there's a lot of blind buys, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And man, rarely, if ever, am disappointed. Anyway, Vinegar Syndrome is an American distribution company of home video, which specializes in protecting and preserving genre films. The company was founded in 2012 in Bridgeport, Connecticut, by Joe Rubin and Ryan Emerson, who created it to restore and distribute lost and otherwise unavailable films, including vintage X-rated and porn as well. They deal in that, but a lot of like old stuff that would be film related, like 70s and things like that. Their catalog has since expanded to include other types of cult and exploitation films, including horror and action. Um, so I think I pretty much covered the backstory, so to speak. So I'll get into my favorite releases. Again, this is not like a top whatever. This is just my favorite releases. And it took a little while. I added to it this and that. I probably have a couple honorable mentions that didn't quite get on them, my absolute favorites. But yeah. First, I'm going to go with a box set. They've been doing really cool box sets. I have all of them. The first one I got was definitely the Amityville box set, but I'll get to that in a little bit. The first one I'm talking about is the Angel collection. I have honestly never even really heard of these movies, surprisingly. And I think all of them are pretty good. I've heard some people in groups say they just like the first one, or the other ones are okay, but blah, blah, blah. I like all of them. And honestly, I think 3 is one of my favorites. I don't know why. I just loved it that much. So what I'm going to do through these releases is, instead of me just blabbing on, they're also, I wanted to mention, the best at describing movies. Like, if not just on the case, but at a convention, they're salesmen. They really are, in a good way, because they have ways of basically making you understand of how much you're going to want this. So I'm going to basically just read the synopsis, and then what they always add towards at the second part of the back of the case. Molly Stewart is at the top of her class at a prestigious private high school she attends. But when her classmates and teachers don't know, is that Molly survives by working nights as a prostitute on Hollywood Boulevard in the company of her friends. A worldly transvestite. I'm terrible at certain words. As anybody know, listen to this. A retired cowboy movie star, and transvestite. Duh. A retired cowboy movie star, and her cantankerous but kind-hearted landlady. However, her world begins to fall apart when a depraved necrophiliac serial killer, I didn't get that from that, maybe I'm reading it wrong, begins targeting LA streetwalkers. As more and more women fall victim to this vicious killer, Molly realizes that it'll be up to her and her friends to take on the maniac before they too find themselves in murderous sights. Mixing brutal slasher style killing scenes with the sweetness of an after school special. Interesting combination, but it's true. But yeah, the necrophiliac thing, I guess I forgot that, but it's been a little bit since I watched Angel. Anyway, Angel is one of the seminal exploitation films of the early 80s, co-starring Dick Shawn, Rory Calhoun, Susan Tyrrell, Cliff Gorman, and featuring beautiful cinematography by Andrew Davis, who also did The Fugitive, along with memorable score by Craig Safin. Vinegar Syndrome is proudly brings Angel to Blu-ray, newly restored in 4K. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but I wanted to read that one. Forgive me with certain words. I'm not great with. I'm good at math. I'm not good that way. So hopefully this won't be too much. So yeah, Angel. That was my first choice. Going right into the second one. This was in one of their last sales. It was a big. Any of the big Vinegar Syndrome people probably already have this. I got the first slipcase of Spookies, and I will say this: Spookies was a little bit. I don't want to say rough for me when I first saw it, but I liked it. But I will say, after watching the documentary and then re-watching the movie, I liked it way more. But yeah, after their car breaks down, a group of travelers find themselves stranded in a remote part of New England. After taking shelter in a spooky old mansion, complete with a graveyard, they discover a Ouija board and decide to spend the night attempting to summon some spirits. But the group soon learns that trying with the forces of black magic isn't fun and games, and it's not long before they're head to head with all sorts of demonic creatures, shapeshifters, and other forms of evil, all of whom are more than happy to pick them off in the most gruesome of ways. That describes it pretty well. It also goes on to say, of all the bizarre horror films made in the 1980s, Spookies easily ranks among the weirdest. Produced by Michael Lee, founder of the adored UK home video distributor Vipco, the film became a fan favorite thanks to its expertly rendered creature effects and notorious for its bizarre production history, in which its original creators, co-writer slash director, I'm probably going to butcher his name, I apologize, Brendan Faulkner and Thomas Doran, and co-writer producer Frank M. Farrell were fired and replaced by Eugene Joseph, who added new scenes and re-edited the previous shot footage, resulting in a legendary oddity, Spookies, that it has become. Vinegar Syndrome proudly presents Spookies on Blu-ray for the first time in 4K, as well as a full-length documentary. I highly recommend this. If anybody's not familiar with it or have been on the fence about it, definitely pick it up. You can't get the slipcase anymore, but I know there's two sides with people. I won't go in the slipcases. I'm a big slipcase guy, but yeah. The next one also had to do with multiple slipcases, but quite a few. I don't remember how many there was. I want to say like 4. Like, there was a lot. I got the incinerator one. I am talking about Cutting Class. This is one that I had seen, but I barely remembered it. It's definitely a little different of a slasher, but it's a good like teen type slasher. More has to do with the teens. Paula Carson, high school experience couldn't be better. Between being class president and dating her the high school basketball player, Dwight, who was played by Brad Pitt. She seems to have everything she could ask for, but when mentally disturbed teenager murderer Brian Wood is released from an area asylum and rejoins the old classmates, it's not long before students and teachers alike turn up missing or are found murdered. While Dwight becomes convinced that Brian's gone back to his violent ways, Paula can't help but to suspect that someone might be trying to set Brian up to carry out their own twisted plan. A distinctly tongue-in-cheek slasher made in the autumn of the genre's popularity. Yeah, it's definitely a good one. It's got a good cast. Again, there's no slipcases for this anymore, but I got I think it's the incinerator one. That's the one I like the best, so that's the one I got. All right, so moving on from there, my next favorite. These aren't even in alphabetical order. I just went off the top of my head, wrote it down, got them out of my. Oh, and if anybody's curious, I just go alphabetical order. I get that some people go by the numbers. I totally understand that, but at the same time, it doesn't work for me because I don't know what number is what, so I'd still be sitting there looking. I just rather know alphabetical order. My next choice is, not too. It's a couple years old, but Grave Robbers. This is definitely one that will be probably one of the 50% off ones. It's it's different, it's weird, but I thought it was really good. And as I said, I'll go right to the synopsis because Vinegar Syndrome is the one that always describes their movies best. Laura Mae Edwards had always dreamed that a handsome and wealthy man would offer to marry her, but she never expected to find love while working the night shift at a sleazy diner. However, when John Henry Cox proposes to her within moments of their meeting, Nora can't help but say yes, is whisked off to John's hometown of Newbury to live in his family mansion. Nora discovers her new husband's profession is that of an undertaker, and that the local death toll is dis. I don't know what that says. If anybody reads it, they'll probably be like, it says this, but dispopulatedly. I don't know what that says. Basically, it's really high. As the joys of the marital bliss soon give way to the increasingly violent nightmares, she begins to suspect that her seemingly gentle husband may be harboring a dark secret, especially when she learns that she's far from the first Mrs. Cox, but even more terrifying, that whilst her husband desires her body, he'd prefer it cold and dead. That's a very good way to describe this movie. It's such a good fucking movie. I highly recommend that one. Definitely check it out. I know I'm saying a lot of recommendations, but obviously you don't have to go with all of them. If any of them sound good to you or whatever, check them out. My next one on my list is one that is highly, like, if I did make an order, this would definitely be in the top 10, if not 5. Excuse me, there's just something about this movie that I just had so much fun with, and I had never seen it. This is another blind buy one, but I've watched this multiple times, is Pledge Night. It's hazing season at Phi Up, and the boys are up to all sorts of nasty pranks on their hapless pledges. In between regular bouts of wetting their whistles at the campus's watering hole with some of the area's beautiful sorority babes. But this is going to be one literal hell week, as they unwillingly unleash the spirit of Acid Sid, an infinite plague who was accidentally dissolved in acid during a hazing prank gone wrong some 20 years ago, as the hapless frat boys and pledges fall victim to Sid's wrath and seemingly indestructible towing zombie corpse. It's up to the stragglers to figure out how to kill someone who's been dead for 2 decades, or die trying. A truly one-of-a-kind blending of post-Animal House TNA sex comedy and a gore-filled supernatural slasher. That's definitely the best way to describe it is, and sorry about the audio was fading out for a second. But yeah, Pledge Night. I highly recommend that. An older release, and I have the slipcase for this too, the cool coffin slipcase, is The Undertaker. Joe Spinell movie. I've never even heard of it. I'm so glad that they put it out, because I'm a big fan of his, but I know he didn't do a whole lot. I mean, I know he did bigger movies, but Joe Spinell, if anybody not familiar with the name, was in Maniac. For years, Roscoe, Joe Spinell's character, has been the town's undertaker. However, inside his funeral home, it's been amassing a bloody collection of human souvenirs, which he uses in unspeakable acts of violence and perversion. When some townspeople begin to disappear under strange circumstances, Roscoe's nephew starts to grow suspicious of the goings-on at his uncle's funeral parlor. As he gets closer to the truth, he inevitably begins putting the lives of those around him at risk, as well as his own. One of cult superstar Joe Spinell's final films, The Undertaker, is a dark and violent slasher featuring one of Spinell's most memorable and flamboyant performances. Again, you can't get the slipcase, but I know some people care about that, some people don't. I highly recommend that. I still think you can still get this standard, but yes, The Undertaker. My next one is definitely a huge one in a previous I can't remember if it was a Black Friday or halfway to Black Friday sale, but Mausoleum, such a cool slipcase. I just love this slipcase. It's so cool. But the Nomad family has been the victim of an ancient curse in which the firstborn daughter of each generation has gone violently mad and then suspiciously dies. No one can explain the nomad madness, and some say it's because of the possession of a terrible demonic force by way of unnatural urge. During her mother's funeral, Susan entered her family's mausoleum, and ever since an evil presence has been lurking inside of her, waiting for a chance to come out. Now, an adult, something is hiding inside Susan's body, coming out to grotesquely murder anyone who came too close to uncovering her terrifying secret. They call it a consummate blend of early 80s supernatural horror and slasher film tropes. Mausoleum is a stylish, sleazy, and outrageously gory production, featuring series of an imaginative death scenes orchestrated by effects wizard John Carl Buechler. Yes, so Mausoleum, I highly recommend that. My next pick is Christmas Evil. Christmas Evil was one of their earlier releases. It's number 60. I think it's one of the first horror movies that I got from them, one of them. But it's so good. And just, I think it was their last sale, if not the one before it. But same thing on this sale. They're going to be doing slipcases for older releases. This was the first one that I bought for slipcases for older releases, Christmas Evil. I thought they were really cool. But if anybody doesn't know about Christmas Evil, this is Christmas Evil. When he was a boy, Harry idolized Santa Claus. But one Christmas Eve, he witnessed something horrifying that forever shattered his innocent understanding of Santa. Now an adult, Harry wants to embody the pure Santa Claus he grew up loving. He works at a toy factory and keeps records of who's been naughty and who's been nice. But the spirit of Christmas isn't what it used to be, and he can't take it. So, garbed in his red suit, Harry decides that the only thing he can do is become Santa Claus himself and make all the naughty townspeople pay in blood. Vinegar Syndrome is proud to present Lewis Jackson's cult favorite, Christmas Evil, newly restored in 4K, and first time on Blu-ray. You can still get this. I know it will be pretty cheap in the sale. I know they don't have any more of the slipcases, but yeah, Christmas Evil. There is the next one. This is a weird one, but a fucking fun movie. It's so much fun. Is Psychos in Love. I introduced this to a buddy of mine, and he just no pun intended, fell in love with it. It's kind of like, I don't want to call it a reality show, but it's kind of like that. It kind of makes it seem like it's like happening, and then like the main character Joe, who speaks to the camera in little segments and things like that. Joe runs a strip club, and Kate is an attractive young manicurist. After bonding over their mutual dislike of grapes, they discover another commonality. Both of them are bloodthirsty serial killers. As they begin to balance their obsession with murder and each other, they meet Herman, a cannibal who, upon discovering their bloodlust, attempts to lure them into killing as a means of satisfy his craving of human flesh. Bloody and hilarious. Gorman Beekard's Psychos in Love is an absurd, homegrown horror comedy which alternates between gratuitous killing scenes and self aware parody of romantic comedies. Um, Another one from the same director and the same star. Well, I don't think he stars in it, but they work together. Is Disconnected. I recommend that too. It's not on my list, but I definitely recommend it. Psychos in Love. Let's just say it's one of those movies you'll never forget. Okay, now my next one is, what can I say? A dream come true that they released it. It is the Amityville Curse collection. I'm not going to go into each and every one of these movies, but I do want to go into my favorite one. It's About Time, and I will mention that Amityville 4, The Evil Escapes. I like that more than I remember, and I know a lot of people say that that's the weaker of the four, but it might be my second favorite. Um, but yeah, I grew up with these movies on like movie channels and things like that, and renting them. But It's About Time has always stuck with me. Um, Jacob Sterling, hotshot architect, has just returned from a latest business trip back to placid Southern California suburb in which he lives with a surprise: an ornate old clock he rescued out of a soon to be demolished mansion in Amityville, New York. With the clock newly placed on Sterling's mantle, he and his family begin to change, ever so slightly at first, into something evil and very deadly. As soon as the malevolent force starts to make its presence known throughout the quiet suburban community, winding its gears to bring about a seemingly unstoppable demonic force. Um, the darkest and most twisted of the cursed objects of the Amityville films. Yeah, like I said, that's my favorite one. I'm not going to go into each one, but it's beyond highly recommended box set. I don't know how much this is going to be at the sale, but I have a feeling you probably, it'd be the time to get it if you want to save a little money on it. Okay, so my next one is a spoof, I guess. And I've heard of this for a long time, so it wasn't completely blind buy, but I had so much fun with it. It's called Wacko, and it stars probably the first thing he ever done. Andrew Dice Clay's in it. George Kennedy's in it. 13 years ago, at a Halloween pumpkin prom, the infamous lawnmower killer went on a brutal rampage, murdering several high school students, including Mary Graves' older sister, traumatizing her for life. Now, after the unexpected escape of a prisoner from the state mental hospital, who may or may not be the killer, is up to a hard-nosed, gruesome Dick Harbinger to solve the case before the lawnmower killer seeks out a new slew of victims at an upcoming pumpkin prom. That is, if anyone is able to survive the hilarious horror hijinks leading up to it. It's like I said, yeah, it's a comedy. It's a comedy horror, but like a spoof type horror. Not really making fun of it, but turning some things on its head. It's definitely fun. I don't know if you can still get it with the slipcase if you're interested in that, but I definitely recommend it if you want a ridiculous type of laugh type of movie. Yeah, so Wacko. My next pick is one that I unfortunately did not get when it was put up, stupidly, but I didn't get necessarily ripped off, thankfully. I ended up getting a pretty good deal on it. I paid a few more dollars than what it initially was, but I finally was able to get it, and I loved it. It's their second of their Vinegar Syndrome archive, Evil Town. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this movie. Um, I know it is. What was it? It was an additional moments and sleaze and strange subplot brewed from its own film, Evil of the Night, which I believe they released that too. I think I have that. But yeah, Evil Town was definitely. I really liked it. I really did. Um, a group of four friends traveling the West Coast arrive in a small town with a strange history of its residents disappearing mysteriously. What's more is that the town's elusive doctor, Dr. Schaefer, is rumored to be conducted sinister experiments on the town's youth so as to combat the aging process. As the group of young travelers find themselves embroiled in a diabolical scheme of medical madness, they realize, perhaps too late, that they are Dr. Schaefer's ideal specimens. Really, really good movie. I really think it's pretty great. Now, um, like kind of like all of them, these are gone. However, they did announce that they found a couple. So if you're like me and you get right on at midnight on basically Thursday night into Friday, they found some. So if you want to get this or anything I said about it, you're like, oh, that sounds really good, I definitely highly recommend jumping on it because they don't have very many. And then once those are gone, they're completely gone because they found them around like their offices or whatever. Okay, so what do we got next? All right, I'm getting through these pretty good. This was a very big release for them. It was their first 4K release. I did not buy the 4K. However, I did buy the 4K of Rad. I did a pre-order, which, by the way, I'm sure people know that, but anybody that did a pre-order will be one of the first people to ship out, as well as the subscribers and things like that, which we will also be able to do. But yeah, Tammy and the T-Rex, I got the Blu-ray. Such a fun movie. I watched it with, I know, terrible. I watched it with my 6-year-old, and he just, once I told him what it was and showed him the cover, he just had to see it. But this one, I'm not even sure if I ever heard of it, but even if I did, they finally released it the right way. This is, the gore cut is in here. Tammy is a popular high school cheerleader whose new boyfriend, Michael, might be the love of her life. But Tammy's jealous ex-boyfriend, Billy, won't stand for anyone coming between him and his girl. So he and friends kidnap Michael, leaving him to be mauled by a lion in the local wildlife reserve. Comatose and at death's door, Michael's body is stolen from the hospital by mad scientist Dr. Wackenstein. Wackenstein, I can't remember how he pronounces it, who extracts his brain and implants it into a giant robotic T-Rex. Horrified by his predicament and new dinosaur body, he escapes from the doctor's lab and begins brutally murdering his former bullies. Meanwhile, Tammy and her best friend Brian, or Byron, start searching for a suitable human corpse in which to retransplant Michael's brain. A jaw-dropping assault on good taste from the whacked-out mind of cult filmmaker Stuart Raffle. He also did Ice Pirates and Mac and Me. It stars Denise Richards and Paul Walker and Sean Whalen's in it. It's a blast, man. If you don't take your movies very seriously, like, there are serious movies to take seriously, and then there are movies that just fucking have fun with it. They have a lot of movies like that, Vinegar Syndrome, but Tammy and the T-Rex is definitely one of those movies. Just go along for the ride. Don't try to look at it like this is this or this isn't realistic, because it's not. It's not. A human's brain get transplanted into a robotic dinosaur. I mean, come on. But I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. And yes, sign me up. I want to see it. But if anybody was on the fence and they like crazy quote unquote stupid shit, and whenever I say, if anybody else is listening to the podcast or new people, just to remind you, whenever I say that, usually I mean in a good way, a fun way, and that's what this is. It's just so much fun. It's just a ridiculous movie, and definitely whoever can still get it, get it. All right. My next one is actually a newer release. I want to say came out a couple months ago. Is Deadline. I think you can still get the slipcase. It's still that new. I highly recommend this movie. I have seen this at my video store growing up over and over again, and for whatever reason, I never fucking rented it. Which at this point it's fine because I saw it better than ever on Blu-ray from Vinegar Syndrome. But man, I'll tell you the synopsis, but I won't go too deep into the rest of the movie at all because it's something else. It's one of those movies that definitely sticks with you. Stephen Leslie makes his living as a horror writer who has learned that the bloodier the story, the bigger the market. But Stephen has also hit a personal crisis wherein he yearns for artistic recognition and an escape from the brutality he conjures up to earn a living. All the while, his horrifying and murderous fantasies begin to blend into day-to-day life, numbing him to his crumbling marriage until a shocking tragedy occurs from which he has no escape. Vinegar Syndrome goes on to say, one of the true hidden gems of Canadian horror cinema, Mario Azzopardi's, probably butchering, I'm not good at names, sorry, Deadline, is an unflinchingly grim, twisted, and cynically comedic study of a man's slow descent into madness. Yeah, man, it's pretty fucking great, I think. But again, these are all opinions; these are not facts. I know some fans of movies know that, and then there's other ones that argue with people. But I'm not saying anybody does with this movie, but Deadline, highly, highly recommend that one. My next one is another fucking fun one, man. This is an Aussie movie, and when I say that, I mean Ozploitation, meaning exploitation from Australia. But this is a later release for them, meaning in time-wise, because they're usually about 70s and 80s. This is 1993. This one wasn't even on the documentary, Not Quite Hollywood, which I had actually seen recently, and I also highly recommend it, and it's just a documentary about Ozploitation movies. Very, very good. It came out about 10 years ago, but definitely check that out. This is not mentioned in it, but I think it's because it's later. They're talking about like 70s and 80s as well. But Body Melt. I don't know if I said that. Sorry, I went a bit on a tangent there. But Body Melt. I will say this: it's almost like there's quite a few different things going on here. There's like different plots because I think I heard that initially it was supposed to be one of those that was not filmed, but the initial idea was for it to be an anthology, and then they ended up just combining all the stories. I don't know how accurate that is, but I did hear that. But anyway, it turned into one crazy fucking movie. Residents of placid suburban cul-de-sac of Pebbles Court have started receiving unexpected samples of a new and experimental vitamin manufactured by a strange health spa named Vimuville. However, shortly after adding to the mysterious green powder to their diets, users begin to experience strange and increasingly macabre visions, and worse, their bodies start to mutate, ooze, and eventually melt. As visits from the coroner to the sleepy street become a nearly daily experience, Detective Sam Phillips becomes increasingly suspicious of the ongoings at Vimuville, but will he be able to uncover its diabolical motives before the whole of Australia is subjected to body melt? So fucking great. Remains one of the last great exploitation films, Vinegar Syndrome goes on to say, packed with gross out gore effects, biting black comedy, and throbbing techno-esque score. The slipcase is real. It was, I thought, cool. Some people didn't like it. It was the Vimuville logo that was like cut out. It almost kind of reminds me of the slipcase for The Undertaker, which it was a cutout of a shape of a coffin, but it says body melt and then Vimuville. But body melt, and it has a cool like sticker on the back of the slipcase too that says, warning, the following feature may be hazardous to your health. Common reactions are hallucinations, glandular issues, and or your face melting off. Yeah, if you like movies like well, if you're a Vinegar Syndrome fan, or if you're new to it, maybe they're not for you. But anybody that's listening that is a Vinegar Syndrome fan, yeah. Another ridiculousness will be the next one. I mentioned my youngest with Tammy and the T-Rex wanting to watch it. My oldest, I have two boys, I described the next one I'm going to talk about uninvited to him. It's a bit of a ridiculous movie, but it is so much fun. At a secluded biochemical lab, which runs cruel tests on animals, a seemingly innocent-looking cat has just escaped, but beneath its furry exterior, the terrifying monster has been seeded, emerging to brutally maim and kill everyone it finds threatening. Discovered by a group of teenage spring breakers and brought aboard a luxury yacht bought for the Cayman Islands, bound for the Cayman Islands, sorry. The cuddly fluff ball quickly begins gnawing away at the ship's guests and crew. But to make matters even worse, it's soon revealed that the cruise's host, a renowned multi-millionaire, is in fact on the run from the law and won't return the boat to the shore. Killer mutant cat be damned. A mind-boggling piece of late 80s horror weirdness, mixing lo-fi creature effects, explosive gore, crime thriller subplots, and a fairly logical cat monster. George Kennedy's in this. Clu Gulager's in this. This is something else. I guess without telling too much else, I did want to mention that it pretty much says it there, but it literally is about this cat that's always around. But when it kills people, another like weird murderous cat comes out of it, like literally out of it, like it's wearing the normal cat skin, and that's the one that does the murders. The movie's something else, but yeah, uninvited. Getting close to. I got a few more here, of my initial 25. The next one is a release that will definitely probably be a cheaper release on their sale, if they still have copies at the moment. It's a double feature of Primeval and Lurkers, but I'm going to be talking actually about Lurkers because they put Primeval first. I'm guessing that is for, I don't know what it's for. Maybe it's because they're both from the same director. I don't know if that was supposed to be the main feature, I would guess. But I actually like Lurkers more. I've seen it. I've watched it about 3 times where I've watched Primeval once. So I'm going to talk about Lurkers. But yeah, if you're looking for it, look under Primeval. and it's a double feature with a movie called Lurkers. When Kathy was a girl, she saw her deranged mother murder her father and only narrowly escaped with her life. Haunted by memories of her macabre childhood, her nightmares turn into a terrifying reality when she lured back to her childhood home, only to be transformed into a lurker, a member of the vengeful dead who seek to terrorize those who wrong them. Finley's suspenseful ghost story explores trauma and grief between moments of shocking violence. Um, and it's definitely a unique movie. I don't know if I've ever seen anything quite like Lurkers, but I definitely recommend it. But that's how you get it. You look up Primeval, and Lurkers is with it. I recommend Primeval too as well, but like I said, I think I prefer Lurkers. The next one is not too much older, but it's number 218. Is a movie called Blue Vengeance. The slipcase was pretty cool, I think. It's another one that's a movie that's something else kind of thing. But I'll just let them just describe it as I have with the other ones. Convicted murderer Mark Trex has just escaped from an asylum and is headed for New York City to track down the members of his favorite childhood band, Warriors of the Inferno. Believing their occult hit song, which told of Satan and death, is true, Trex is determined to see if the band members have held up their part of the pact with evil. However, cop on the edge, Mickey McCardle, is hot on his trail and determined to end the serial killer spree. Vinegar Syndrome goes on to describe it as a strange mashup of horror and action film. Blue Vengeance combines gory killing with drug-altered underground rock club scenes and a corrupt cop procedure that's set in the gritty world of late 80s New York, and comes complete with visits to Times Square and the infamous rock club CBGB's. I haven't seen this since I initially got it, but it's definitely one that I'm going to revisit very soon. This movie was a lot of fucking fun. And anything that has to do with Times Square in like the 70s and the 80s, like 42nd Street, I'm all about it. So, Blue Vengeance. Okay, my next favorite release of my 25 favorite releases is again a movie that I saw continuously in my video store and never rented it. Maybe because it looked like some kind of Jason ripoff, I don't know. And the title could be confusing to some people, but it's also just like a play on how many sequels movies had, like Friday the 13th, and I'm not dogging it. I fucking love Friday the 13th. Bring on as many as you want to give me. Jason is my favorite slasher. Anyway, the movie I'm talking about right now is called Unmasked Part 25. Just the Part 25 has always been like ridiculous. But anyway, Jackson is your run-of-the-mill hockey mask wearing psychotic killer. Hideously deformed, he spends his time stalking and brutally murdering oversexed young people in a variety of nasty methods. And then he meets Shelley, a young blind woman who appreciates him as a person. It helps that she can't see the carnage he leaves at every turn. Finding himself falling in love for the first time, Jackson decides that it might be time to finally hang up his cutlery and settle into a happy life of domestic bliss. But can he really overcome the bloodthirsty impulses? Vinegar Syndrome goes on to say, a biting horror comedy from director Anders Palm and producer Mark Cutforth. Unmasked 25 also known as Hand of Death. I almost wish they just would have called it Hand of Death, but Unmasked 25 is just such a ridiculous fucking title that I get why you would keep that. Cleverly plays off as every 80s cliche, along with, let's see, along with a number of indie tropes for good measure. And there's some gruesome gore effects and that can be found in Post Nasty's, a British-made film. This movie is awesome. This movie is ridiculous, but thankfully, just as unfortunately I never discovered it on VHS. I always looked at it, but now having this, I didn't even buy this initially because I saw it and I'm like, oh, that movie. Because I always had it in my head like is it just picking on Jason? Some people think it might be. I don't necessarily think that, but it's in there, I guess. But I thankfully saw it when I saw it and had a lot of fun with it. So, Unmasked Part 25. All right, almost done here. Whoops. This was another one of the ones that was definitely a blind buy. However, I think I had heard of it, but that was it. So it wasn't completely blind, but for the most part, is Mountaintop Motel Massacre. This is another release from last year, so it's number 276. So it will definitely be one of them that will be. You'll get it for a good price. I don't think you can still get the slipcase, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Anyway, Mountaintop Motel Massacre description is: Evelyn runs the Mountaintop Motel, a cluster of ramshackled cabins nestled deep in the Texas countryside. But Evelyn isn't all there. Instead, tormented by ghostly voices and visions which cause her to periodically lose her grip on reality, until one fateful day, lost in a bout of insanity, she unwillingly murders her young daughter. Although the police rule it as an accident, Evelyn's guilt soon overtakes her, plunging her deeper and deeper into the world of violent paranoia. When a group of travelers arrive to spend the night at the motel, Evelyn completely detaches from reality and, viewing her new guests as a threat, begins to terrorize and dispatch them one by one with the help of her trusty sickle. I think that's how you pronounce that. And then Vinegar Syndrome goes on to say it's an atmospheric regional slasher. From the director Jim McAuliffe Sr., who also did The Creature from Black Lake. Mountaintop Motel Massacre blends suspenseful psychological drama with gory killings, filled with gorgeously gelled cinematography from Joseph Wilcox, who did Roots, apparently. That's interesting. But yeah, another one I highly recommend. Again, I know I have quite a few on here, but you don't have to go with all of them. If any of these seem cool to you, I'm recommending all of these. Check out any of them. I, as you can tell, am a bit obsessed. I'll take a little break from the order for a minute. With Vinegar Syndrome, it's one of the biggest things for me in collecting movies. It's just turned into that. I've always been like that with some other labels like Arrow and stuff, and I love those too, but there's something about Vinegar Syndrome that whenever they have a sale, it's almost like I get ready for it like it's a bill. I know that sounds crazy to some, but basically I just mean saving, like a lot of people do. I save, but it's definitely a big part of my collecting, and they really have, for different reasons than, like, say Blue Underground or Scream Factory, which I love those, and I love 88 Films, and I love Severin. Severin is getting up there for me too. They've been releasing a lot of good stuff, but there's just something with Vinegar Syndrome that I just have this infatuation with it. I just this love for what they do. They're just so great at what they do, and they're so good at dealing with customer relations and customer service and the restoring of films. It's just amazing at what they do, and they put out some great movies that for some you would have never saw them if they didn't release it. So it's just a labor of love, so to speak. Not that I created it, but just to be able to own these and collect these and have fun with them, and knowing that I'm going on some kind of weird journey with a certain movie, or just a weird trip, so to speak. Every time I pop in a Vinegar Syndrome release, there's so many great things coming up. I just know it, and I know of, as everybody else does, if you listen to the Shockwaves podcast, even though it was blank, that they did talk about another release, which was cool. I'm not one to be able to say it because they said it themselves. I'm not gonna be that guy, even though people do know, but some people don't know that if they don't listen to Shockwaves. But I highly recommend Shockwaves too. The Vinegar Syndrome guys have been on 3 times, and it's some of their best episodes. So go look up Shockwaves if you haven't, and check out the Vinegar Syndrome episodes, and then go from there. But they're just amazing at what they do. Anyway, off on that tangent, my next choice is a bit of a cheat, but I'm only going to read... I don't even know if I'm going to read it. Yeah, I'm not even going to read it. Because it's actually recommending 4 movies, but overall, because they released 4 Rudy Ray Moore movies. And I've been a fan of his movies for many, many years. They're absolutely ridiculous and stupid and just... what am I watching kind of thing, but in such a fun way, and you just want to finish it because you don't know what's going to happen next kind of thing. But yeah, the 2 out of the 4 I would highly recommend the most is Dolomite and the Human Tornado. A buddy of mine, we love these Rudy Ray Moore stuff so much that we recite some of his lines. A good line in Dolomite that is one that's not talked about a lot, but is Rudy Ray Moore's character Dolomite is walking into a funeral parlor, and the woman starts saying, "Oh, I'm really scared," and whatever, and he's like, "What are you scared about?" And she's like, "Well," I can't remember the exact line, but, "Well, I don't want to see a ghost." And Dolomite says, You scared of a ghost? What? If I see a ghost, I cut the motherfucker." Every time I hear that line, I geek out because I'm like, I'm not going to get into the whole ghost thing because that's a different episode, but I do believe in ghosts and things like that. I have seen ghosts, but anyway, on this, continuing on this topic, that's just so ridiculous. So that's how are you going to cut a ghost? I don't know. But anyway, and Human Tornado is basically the trailer, just the way they say, the Human Tornado. And that's one that I recite all the time, too. But Rudy Ray Moore as a whole, I'd recommend these 2 the most, Dolomite and the Human Tornado. But there is 2 other ones at the moment, too. Petey Wheatstraw and Disco Godfather. Also good, also fun, but yeah, Rudy Ray Moore. All right, so I got 4 left out of my 25. I'm doing pretty good. My next one is also one that was a popular release. Really, really cool slipcase. Granted, it's just so cool. This movie I had heard of, but again, hadn't seen it, and I'm talking about Incubus. Definitely, a recommendation. I know I don't have to say that every time because all of these are. I apologize and I do repeat, but um, anyway, a quiet New England town becomes the site of a grisly murder and assault, leaving a young man dead and his girlfriend in critical condition. Sam Cordell, head surgeon and medical examiner at a local hospital, senses something isn't quite normal about the attacker. But barely a day later, another woman is savagely assaulted and killed. With the realization that a maniac is on the loose, Sam, with the help of police chief Hank Walden, Hank Walden, and newspaper columnist Laura Kincaid, must unravel the mystery before an additional murders occur. All the while unaware that Sam's own daughter, Jenny, might be the next victim on the list. Vinegar Syndrome goes on to say, an intense and disturbing supernatural slasher. I don't know how to say the director's last name. John Hughes. I don't Hugh. John Hugh. He also did The Legend of Hell House and the amazing American Gothic. That movie stuck with me so much when I was a kid. I still love it. But anyway, the movie stars John Cassavetes, John Ireland, and it's definitely an interesting movie and a fun ride. Incubus. All right. Now, my next of my favorites is one of their newest releases. I kind of bought this on a blind buy. It just sounded good, and I didn't even read the whole thing. But it's before I even go into it, it's directed by Uli Lamel, who did The Boogeyman. So yeah, and it stars Susan Love, of course, which was in his other one, in many of his movies. But Olivia, it was, oh my god, it was one of those movies where it was over and I was blown away and I was sad that it was over. Not sad, but I was disappointed it was over. It's such a good fucking movie. Anyway, when she was a child, Olivia witnessed the horrifying and violent murder of her prostitute mother at the hands of an angry John. Now, an adult, she's married to an abusive and controlling factory worker. That is, until her mother appears to her and demands that Olivia avenge her death by seducing and then slaying men. While disposing of her body of a body near the London Bridge, Olivia has a chance meeting with a friendly American named Mike, who reveals that he's visiting England in order to dismantle and move the bridge to Arizona, setting off a series of increasingly strange events and a lot more bloodshed. Yeah, there's, I can't really say much else except what they said, but just watch it. It's so good. I highly, it's just so good. In my opinion, I don't want to overhype it, but man, it was really great. In my opinion, again, opinions are okay. Okay. My next one, I have two left. Next to last one is one of their coolest slipcovers. It's a holographic one that it goes back and forth with two different pictures. And if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about yet, I'm talking about Demon Wind. Demon Wind, I've seen a couple of times. The second time I saw it was with Joe Bob Briggs on The Last Drive-In, which was so much fun. But Demon Wind is something else, and again, I'll let them describe it. The strange and brutal death of Corey's grandparents has haunted him for years. Determined to discover the truth, he has returned to the desolate region where they lived, along with a group of friends, to try and uncover the mystery. Ignoring warnings from the locals that the area is cursed, Corey and his friends soon realize that legends are true, and the demon wind possesses and destroys them one by one, turning them into monsters from hell. And Vinegar Syndrome goes on to say, taking equal inspiration from the Evil Dead and visual aesthetics of early 80s work of Lucio Fulci, Charlie Philip Moore's Demon Wind is a supernatural shocker loaded with an abundance of gore and extraordinary good creature effects. Really fun movie, sometimes really ridiculous. Demon Wind. That's a if this was a movie that wasn't on Vinegar Syndrome, if you saw it otherwise, you'd be like, this should be on Vinegar Syndrome. All right, so my last of my 25 is a movie that I actually grew up with. Unlike most of these, which isn't a bad thing. I love discovering. I love rediscovering. But my last one is an older release of theirs. This number 78 is Madman. Such a good release. There's so many great things on it. Lots of great interviews, documentary. But if anybody doesn't know, I'll still read it. I did find it interesting before I do, however, that I don't know if she put her name, what the name she used on here, but Galen Ross, who was in Dawn of the Dead, did this movie. For whatever reason, she does not acknowledge it. I believe she even had a different name on it, and at that time I wonder if it was because I can't remember what they call that, but she wasn't supposed to be working on it, so she had to change her name. But she won't even talk about it now. I just met her last year, and or 2 years ago, and I said I even love Madman, and she just stared at me. And I know she's on the movie. It's not like anybody's like, oh, that's not her. No, it's totally her. But she won't. Maybe she just has such a terrible experience. I don't know what the issue is, but Galen Ross will not talk about Madman. And again, another Joe Bob Briggs episode that was so good. Joe Bob Briggs sang the song, the Madman song. But if anybody hasn't seen it, I definitely you should pick it up if you don't have it. It'll be one of the cheaper ones because it's a lot older. But anybody that doesn't know about Madman, here we go. Years ago, Madman Mars violently murdered his family only to escape into the woods before his execution could be completed. Legend has it that everyone who calls his name above a whisper can summon him back to continue his bloody rampage. But teenager Richie, away at camp, doesn't believe the old legend and calls his name. As night falls, strange things start to happen at camp, and soon Madman Mars is back, axe in hand, to finish the killing spree he started decades ago. They go on to say one of the true classics of 80s slasher cinema. Abso-fucking-lutely. There are many movies in the slasher, because I'm a huge slasher guy, that I do like more than Madman, but Madman is pretty great. So yeah, that was my 25 favorite movies. Initially it was just my 25 favorite movies, but hey, like I said, take them as recommendations. I love helping people out with discovering more Vinegar Syndrome. And that's why I really wanted to get it done, just so it's done. So for two reasons, why I did this. Now, my last four are also still recommendations, but they're more of a honorable mention, I guess. Take it what you will. I still love these too. They just weren't an initial 25 because I got to 25 like, holy shit, I got to 25. It started as top, like my favorite 10. You see how that went. Anyway, I won't really go into some of these like synopsises or anything, but Blood Theater. Now, Blood Theater is absolutely fucking ridiculous. It was just one of those movies where I just couldn't stop watching it, but I've heard people say they hate it, but I also think that sometimes do you not get the ridiculousness of some Vinegar Syndrome movies? I don't know. Um, but it's definitely something else. I have the slipcase. Slipcase is pretty cool. I did the flip around for the other cover on the regular case because um, it's a double feature with another from the same director, Rick Sloan, um, Visitants, and that one was ridiculous too. But I like ridiculousness. I like um, I just yeah, I just like crazy movies, whether it's good production values or not. I just it's sometimes you got to suspend the belief of reality and or all the time. Actually, you know what? I'll always say that it's a movie. Just have fun with it. I'm that guy. I'm not the guy that has to say something like about um, say Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, that gets such a bad rap because everybody's so convinced, like, oh, well, how is a boat going from New Jersey to blah, blah, blah in the ocean? Or it's Jason Takes Vancouver because it wasn't that much in New York and blah, 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 blah. Fine, those are your opinions. Those bother you. I understand that. I have my own. However, I don't let those things bother me. Part 8 is one of my favorite Friday the 13th. This has nothing to do with Vinegar Syndrome, and I don't even know how I got on this tangent, but I love Part 8, and that's my opinion, and that's okay. Everybody's going to have their opinion. I just love in some groups where they're like, oh, well, you're wrong. How am I wrong? My opinion, I like what I like. You like what you like. That's cool, but I love Part 8. Again, has nothing to do with Vinegar Syndrome, but I love Jason Takes Manhattan, whether it's Manhattan or not. So, um, on my next two, I'm just gonna say, some people might have been curious, like, do you like the other side of Vinegar Syndrome because they restore porn, um, for lack of a better term, um, but some of them are actually really good. Like, because they're older, so it was around the time where there's plot and there's but one I discovered recently, which is it's not too old, like when it was released. I don't know when it was released. 2018. Um, Memories Within Miss Aggie. This is kind of like a they don't Vinegar Syndrome doesn't say this, and maybe I'm just seeing it as like a regular movie brain because some porns like that they have different stories and blah blah blah. But it's to me it's kind of like an anthology because throughout it Aggie is telling these different sexual escapade stories, and she's telling it to who we think is her would be boyfriend, husband, whatever. Um, and each story is a different actors and different actress and everything, but she's saying it like it happened to her. But she's, I guess you could say, deranged to the point where she thinks they did, and the more she tells them, maybe she'll believe it more. But it's almost like, did these things happen? You know? But the ending is a horror ending. Like, it's not porn, it's a horror ending. And once you get to that ending, man, wow. That's all I have to say. But if you're a little bit into, you want to dabble in their porn a little bit, Memories Within Miss Aggie, highly recommend that. And my other recommendation for those, and forgive some listeners that might be like, oh my god, I'm just reading a title. This is a movie that I've always wanted to check out, just for the simple fact, even though it's not credited to him, it's credited to Jimmy Boy L. Hey, Jimmy Boy, we know who you really are. It's Abel Ferrara's movie, Nine Lives of a Wet Pussy, and it was really cool that they released it, even with a slipcase. They gave it such like an honorable thing, and to be perfectly honest, I thought for what it was pretty good. But I wanted to recommend these two because I didn't want to neglect that part of it. It's not my favorite part of it. I love what I love, as you can tell, but And lastly, this one I will read the synopsis. This one was on in my top whatever. We'll just say it is to a degree. Is The Suckling. This movie is fucking ridiculous. I'll just read it because I can't really explain it. After being tricked into having an abortion at Big Mama's underground abortion clinic slash brothel, yeah, a young woman's extracted fetus is flushed into the sewer system, wherein it's exposed to toxic waste and begins to mutate into an ever-growing and increasingly bloodthirsty monster. You know what? That's really all I have to read because that's what it is, and it's so ridiculous. And just again, if you can have fun with a ridiculous movie and you're not easily offended, or if you're like me and I don't get offended, I don't give a fuck, it's easier not to care, just go with it, just have fun. The Suckling. I don't think you can get the slipcase anymore. It's a really cool slipcase, but it's embossed and stuff. But yeah, that one will probably be it will definitely probably be one of their cheaper releases. If you like ridiculousness, if you like ridiculous monster movies that aren't necessarily the greatest production-wise, I guess. I don't want to say anything bad about it because there really isn't anything too bad about it. But the monster does actually look pretty good. I will say that. But The Suckling. So anyway, kind of like at the end of the Joe Bob's Last Drive-In, there's this thing with Vinegar Syndrome on their releases up until kind of recently that was pre-menu that they took out, and now it just says Vinegar Syndrome, and I think it says the website. I really miss this because it describes Vinegar Syndrome really fast, but it describes it well, and I've slowed it down a while ago, and I literally wrote down what it is. So for anybody that listened to all the way to the end of this and still wants to know what Vinegar Syndrome truly is, not the description, but what it has come to be and what they release and what they specialize in, here we go. Vinegar Syndrome is, it doesn't say is on there, but Vinegar Syndrome, underground, obscure, cult, art house, sexploitation, trash, horror, schlock, sleaze, genre, oddball, slasher, short, long, hard, soft, good, bad, very bad, lost, found, this film. I highly recommend Vinegar Syndrome, as I've said. Obviously, I want you guys to hopefully have fun with it. Enjoy the sale. Everybody have fun with their new releases and the excitement of what else is coming out. If you're new to Vinegar Syndrome and you're listening to this, welcome. I could go... I'm sure I'll do another Vinegar Syndrome podcast at some point, but this was really fun, and I'm really glad that I finally did it. I want to thank whoever's listening, any new people that are listening, anybody from the group that I posted it in. Thanks to the admin there. I had talked to him, and he said it was awesome. Or not, he said it was okay if I posted it there, which is really cool because some groups don't allow that, but talking about Vinegar Syndrome. So he's like, yeah, talking about Vinegar Syndrome? Sure. So that was awesome. I want to personally on here say thank you to him. But anyway, this has been the Horror of It All movie podcast. I'm Eric. Until next time.